The offseason continues, and Minnesota Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell is here. And Kevin, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me. I would be remiss if we did not start this interview off talking and celebrating the life of the late Bud Grant this past weekend. The most vivid picture that comes to mind when I think of just you and him is your introductory press conference last year. Right before you went on stage, you guys shared a moment in the hallway. And I can only imagine what that meant for you. But as the head coach for the Minnesota Vikings now and understanding his legacy, what did he mean to you?
I think I'm so glad you start out talking about that moment, because at that point in time, everything's going so fast. You're coming off of a Super Bowl, and then you're on a plane here, and before you know it, you're the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. But in that moment, getting a chance to spend some precious time with him on day one, it put in perspective what it meant to get the opportunity to be the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings because of, what Bud Grant meant to not only this organization, but the NFL as a whole, and just one of the dynamic, foundational leaders of our game over the past half century plus, and just his impact on our organization, just the mindset of what it means to win in Minnesota, some of the core characteristics of what every football team should strive to have. His football teams all had them. And then what led to that, or what happened from there, was a real relationship where anytime he would allow me to have time with him, I tried to do that. He'd come by every single week throughout the season, and we'd have some time after lunch together up in his beautiful office up on the third floor. And just his willingness to want to even sit down with me, have some great discussions after some of our close wins, and the same great discussions after a loss or two, where he always preached, how do I, as the head coach, lead? How do I have the proper mindset? And all while trying to get to know me, my family. I actually getting ready to, come in this morning, I saw, when my daughter was born during the season, he made sure to bring a stuffed animal of one of his favorite kind of ducks he likes to hunt. Yeah. Brought that in for me to give to Callie when she was born. So that sits right in her room, and we'll always know that came from Coach Grant.
That's awesome. And just being a head coach now, a couple of weeks ago, we talked at the Combine about, just some of your thought processes, your nervousness going into the Combine as a player, and some of the questions that, players had for you as the head coach for the Vikings this past week. But for you, how much of being in those meeting rooms as a player, being asked some of those questions that some of those head coaches were asking when you were going through that draft process, helped you when asking questions to players now?
Yeah, I think it just helps you kind of read the room sometimes. Yeah. Those formals can go a lot of different ways. Sometimes you go down a path of a guy's background, decisions they've made in the past, positive or negative, and you really kind of try to get to know who you're talking to in that 15 to 18-minute time span. Other times it goes down a football path via film, or getting them up on the board. What I try to do is find those moments where I could feel either an uncomfortable feeling from the player, or is this guy really genuinely being himself? Mm-hmm. And I'll try to recognize that, and whether I make a joke or try to get them to lighten up or loosen up and just be themselves, because it's really just all we're trying to do is truly understand who we would be bringing into our building as a new member of our team. So. And you want them to put their best foot forward, and any way you can do that. I think the Combine can be hard sometimes to truly get that crystal clear picture of what you're getting, but using it as the tool that it is to help us and help the player, we have ways to make the Vikings experience during those formal interviews something that hopefully they take with them moving forward.
That's awesome, KO. I've always been a component of having those meetings in the morning, because when you get to the NFL, it's like all the morning meetings happen, or all the meetings in the NFL happen in the morning. So like the fact that they happen at night, I'm sure that's another dynamic to what you guys do, right?
Yeah, well, even noticed the new schedule this year, which I thought was good for the players in the course of their whole week there. But we actually had 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. formals every single day, and then we had 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. formals every night. So if anything, people need to start being concerned about my well-being a little bit more. And Kwesi and I sit next to each other for that amount of time. But I will tell you that you do notice a difference. You notice a difference between that 8 a.m. fresh out of the bed with a cup of coffee. These players are ready to go. Versus, hey, 10:45 at night, their last formal. They might have that day talked to 15, 14 teams, and you're the last team that is talking to the player. And I make sure they know, you got to treat this one exactly how you did the first one, which was about 15 hours ago. It seems like, but you never know when you're going to be talking to your future team.
That's a really good point. And just speaking of the future team, this past week for the Minnesota Vikings, there were, just some veterans, I guess just being honest, just being released from this Minnesota Vikings team. And I remember we talked about this in Washington when we worked together. But as a head coach, is there any benefit releasing a veteran early on in free agency versus later?
First and foremost, I think the hardest part about our league is, we do have a salary cap, and we have to construct a roster not only for, week one of the 2023 season, but we have to also look towards the future and how we're going to build our team and how we're going to add pieces to our team. So you never, ever want to have to release any players. You would love to. As a former player that got released more than probably anybody, I'd like to keep everybody and develop and allow, the guys that have earned the right to go out on their terms to go out that way. It's just really, really hard. And there's nothing that makes it easier. Releasing them earlier or later, a lot of the times with the later on in free agency, what that is, or leading into, what that is us trying to find a way to make, either make it work, maybe work with the player to try to help them find a destination via trade, to help them, find the best possible home. And then ultimately getting as much information as we can about what that player's current value is, so that, it's easy to say this, but we want our players leaving here with good feelings towards this organization, regardless of circumstance. And I'm always going to pick up the phone and call them and wish them well, thank them for what they did for this organization, either when I was the head coach or in some cases long before I became the head coach here, because I think that's what they deserve. That's what they've earned. Yeah. And, so it's never easy. But ultimately what we want to do is two things: whatever is in the best interest of the Minnesota Vikings, but making sure we're trying to do what's best for the player as well.
And you use the word value, and the first thing that came to mind was just the NFL draft this year. We have 5 picks, first rounder, then we don't have a second rounder at this moment, then we go towards the later rounds.
Yep. How
do you define value when it comes to those later rounds?
I think, in the scale that Kwesi's brought in, that the scouting staff uses, we use as a coaching staff to try to integrate and make sure we're all on the same page. I think it's about trying to find players with the potential to be starter caliber players. Can you find players with traits that maybe where they lack in certain areas? As a coaching staff and personnel side, we're all on the same page about what the expectation of that player is going to be. How do we teach, grow, and develop that player to a point where they can be an every down potential contributor, or if not, what are the roles they can do and thrive in to eventually become, their maximum potential, whatever it's going to be in this league. We'd like it to be here on our team, and if we can get them, the later we can get them in the draft and the more impact they provide, that's value in its purest form.
And understanding, how chips move. I remember we talked about just the awareness of the opposition to help, best suit the Minnesota Vikings when it comes to, I guess, just figuring out, building outside in versus inside out. How does that factor into value?
I think you just have to pick your spots. Okay. We're never going to be a team just because we do like so many of our own players, and we're going to be giving those guys new contracts and extensions and trying to build, like you said, inside out is always the way you'd love to grow, from your draft picks to the development that you pour into those players to ultimately then they sign extensions in their Minnesota Vikings for a long time. But year in and year out, there's going to be some pieces that you can add. If you're trying to be competitive in every sense of the word, you've got to do everything you can to find whatever advantages and edges you can to improve your team. Sometimes it's free agency in the first wave. Sometimes it's the second or third wave. Sometimes it's as simple as picking up a Kairos Tonga or a Duke Shelley in the middle of the season, and then we're going into the offseason saying, hey, we've got some every down contributor type of players that we didn't have to go crazy using early draft picks or giving a bunch of money to at the start of free agency. You can find it. Your building's got to be on the same page. You got to have great leadership from your general manager. And then on the coaching side, we need to know how to use the players to solidify what their role and their ability to grow on our team is going to be.
And I think one thing that kind of helps it all come together is the fact that this facility, TCO Performance Center, was rated the #1 facility and support staff in the NFL. When it comes to free agency and bringing guys in for not only top 30 visits, but free agency visits, how much does that factor into the thought process?
I think that the best part about that information is it came from the players.
Yeah.
It's one thing for us to, pound our chest and tell everybody how great we think we are. Those who, tend to be very proud of our building. We're so blessed from the Wilfs to get every resource possible, including the walls that we're sitting in right now, knowing it goes much further beyond that. It's about the people. It's about people like Tyler Williams, Josh Hinks, Uriah, Remy, these people that have roles and responsibilities that outside of our organization, not a lot of people know, but the players do. Mm-hmm. So that's why that was really cool to see the A's across the board. I can say this might be breaking news. I never received straight A's in my life. So to see that for the first time was something that I'm half-heartedly, obviously, not directly associated with, but I feel responsible for being in a leadership role, trying to allow those people to be at their best for our players. I'll take those straight A's, hopefully year in and year out here, as long as they'll have me.
Hey, Coach, the grading scale starts a little bit over a month from now, April 17th. So I'm looking to see how the report card looks at the end of the season. I'm excited for you, Coach.
Thanks, Gabe.